Good morning, everybody. I'm Douglas Marion, filling in on behalf of Bill Russell. He is out for Leadership Lake Norman today with the Chamber of Commerce. Um, we've got some upcoming events I just want to mention briefly on the beginning of the call. We've got the Diversity Luncheon next Thursday. If you want to sign up for that, feel free to join our chamber calendar online. Has all of our upcoming events. We have the Business Expo in Huntersville coming up October 8th. We have a golf outing tournament October 28th. And don't forget about our Chamber of Commerce Foundation fundraiser. We're going to be doing that November 12th. So feel free to visit the lakenormanchamber.org website, go to the calendar of events. We've got a lot of stuff upcoming. As I said, mentioned I'm filling in for Bill. He's out today, the previous chairman of 2023. I'm joined by Beth Cashion, who will be emceeing the event today. We've got Mike Riley with Novant Health on the line as presenting sponsor of our Focus Fridays today with Patrick McHenry. Mike, do you want to say a few words from Novant?
Sure, Douglas. Thanks a lot. Yeah, Novant is always happy to sponsor Focus Friday. This always interesting educational things that we learn here. I'm sure, Congressman, that would be no different today. I'm excited to hear what you have to say. And just some healthcare updates. COVID is on the rise, but I get good news and bad news with that. But the good news is it's primarily minor. It's out in the community. It's almost like a cold, like the flu. We see some of that here in the hospital, but it's not like it was certainly 2, 3, 4 years ago. So I would tell everybody to protect yourselves and be careful. And it's spreading more in the community than before, but it's not at the severity level that it was before. So that's my healthcare tip for the week. And then also, and I'll mention this every time until we have it. November 2nd, we're having our 20th year anniversary celebration here at the hospital. Community's invited. It's a lot of people say it's amazing that Huntersville Medical Center has been here for 20 years. So that's all I've got, and I'll give it back to you, Douglas.
Great. Thank you, Mike. With that, I'll introduce Beth Cashion. Beth is going to be the one guy in the conversation today with Mr. McHenry. And Beth, take it away.
Thank you. Thank you, Doug. Thanks very much. And thank you, Mike. As always, it is hard to believe that Huntersville Medical, you've been here for 20 years, and we certainly look forward to another many more. Sorry about the COVID rise, and everybody needs to stay safe and healthy out there. Congressman McHenry, we want to welcome you to our Lake Norman Friday Focus for our October event. It's an honor to have you join us, and I appreciate the opportunity for you to join us by Zoom. I will admit that I'm a novice on the Zoom facilitation, so if the computer falls over or I disappear, it's totally user error. So we'll go with that. It could take me 30 minutes to introduce Congressman McHenry. He has been serving the 10th Congressional District for 20 years now. He has been in the political realm since his days in college when he first ran as a young man, I think, for a North Carolina office. So many accolades, so many opportunities, and so many titles. To begin with, well, the 10th Congressional District, let's all understand, is a large district. I think it comprises maybe 9 counties from Charlotte to Lake Norman, up to Pisgah National Park, maybe, and Burke County. The congressman was elected this year. You've been chairman of the House Financial Services Committee. You've had titles and roles as a Republican leader of Congress, the chief deputy whip, chairman of the House Financial Services Committee, Oversight and Investigations Committee. You have introduced multiple bills that have passed cross party lines, crossed the aisle, and brought consensus to Congress, which is appreciated. You've authored many important laws that have been signed by President Obama as well as others, the RAISE Act, the Jobs Act, all of which affect us directly here in North Carolina, which we would love to hear about your thoughts as well on how you process opportunities to pass law and legislate for your constituents here. The more recent headline grabber, of course, was last year when you took the Speaker of the House position when uh, Speaker McCarthy had stepped down. It was a short period, a first historical time for our country, and we'd love to hear more about that. The congressman is not running this year. Interested in hearing what's next for you on that realm. You currently are living in Gastonia, I believe, and went to Gastonia High School in Belmont Abbey. You have your wife and your 2 daughters and a son as well. So it's a short. I tried to shorten the bio because I want to give the congressman the opportunity to speak. And if you would, Congressman, just sort of open up with a State of the Union, what your take is for the last 20 years and your constituents, and maybe a little bit about what's next.
Well, thank you, and good to be with you. Sorry I couldn't be in person. It's a small enough group so we can easily have conversation here. Yeah, I could give you the history of the last 20 years of my service, but nobody wants to hear that. And so I will spare you of that pain. This has been a Congress unlike any in recent memory, any in really longer history. And so to play a little role in what was a wild Congress is nice to try to have some meaningful impact and try to make things a little more normal than they're otherwise been in Washington for the last couple of years. But look, I mean, I can tell you about me, but that's not of interest. We're all worried about our economy. The Fed decision the other day is a great example of decisions born out of Washington that have this massive impact on the American people. And so let's just get to that. But it's been an honor to represent the 10th district for the last 20 years. There's been a lot of changes to the district over the years. But it's always been an honor to represent Western North Carolina, and remains an honor. And then looking around my office, there's legacies of every iteration of the 10th district, pretty much, around my office. I've got right over my shoulder here is the Seven Sisters, which the honor to represent Asheville and go further west with the 10th district, and including Pisgah. And that's changed over time, but it still, remains on my wall. And then one of my favorite beers is right here with Green Man. So always do that as just a serious choice. And then what I realized after years of doing Zooms like this is that there's this, wooden statue right here that I've in the background. No one's ever asked me about it. And so this morning, as I'm sitting here on camera, I'm thinking, it's a heck of a thing. I'm the youngest of 5 kids. My dad was a salesman early in his career, and he won a trip on a cruise. So we drove from Gastonia to Miami with 5 kids, my mom and dad, and a Volkswagen Rabbit.
Yeah. Wow.
Which makes like the little Subaru Impreza look like a Cadillac.
Right.
And it took 2 days to drive down to Miami. We get on this cruise ship, and one of the things that we brought back was this wooden guy. My brother got that, and then he also had a 3-foot statue of that he brought back in the car on the ride back. So it shows a couple of things. First of all, my parents are a little insane, but this is a little legacy of that. So anyway, going through those things, I'll spare you the rest. But let's get back to the subject at hand, the economy, the state of play here in this window of a national election. And everyone has an opinion about that. I'm not going to persuade anyone or dissuade anyone of their deeply held views. I don't think anyone on the Zoom is a undecided voter, or someone who lacks an opinion. We may not like the choices we have, but I don't know that there's much in the way of persuasion here. So let's just get to the facts. Look, the fact is that we've experienced post-COVID inflation like other countries have not, because it's born out of federal spending and the Federal Reserve missing on interest rates. The overspending of Washington inflamed what was already a hot economy coming out of COVID. We didn't have a demand issue, we had a supply issue, and supply constraints driving up the cost of things. And when Congress shoveled out $3 trillion in a period of 3 months, the Federal Reserve was slow to react to that. Sorry, those are the bells to say that the House is coming into session in 15 minutes. We missed it. And that was born out of that federal overspending. That has had ramifications on state and local budgets, much to the benefit of state and local budgets, frankly. But it's made construction more expensive, housing more expensive. It resulted in the Federal Reserve being forced to raise interest rates to try to curb inflation. And they've been at that for 3 years. And it's been painful for folks. It's been painful for folks trying to get a house for the first time. It's been painful for people trying to buy a car. It's had an impact on people's lives, especially those on the margins. So there are consequences of overspending. There's consequences of inflation, and we haven't seen inflation like this since the early 80s. It's been a pretty nasty experience, pretty bad experience. I wouldn't say nasty, but bad. And now the Federal Reserve sees data coming in and says, well, inflation's receding. That is a good thing. We're going to pull back just a little bit to signal to the market that we're on the we're not on the upward trajectory for rates. So that was the announcement this past week. I chair the Financial Services Committee. I should have said that at the beginning.
Right.
Chairing the Financial Services Committee gives you oversight of the securities market, banking, the Federal Reserve, and housing.
Which you've served on that committee since your first election.
And for the last 6 years, I've been the lead Republican, and the last 2, the chair of the committee. So we try to move sound policy, sound regulatory policy. It's good for pro-growth policies. That's good for pro-growth economic forces. Important work around giving clarity to digital assets and defining what is cryptocurrency and what is not, and a means of exchange, as well as improving data privacy standards for financial firms. So a couple things I wanted to touch on there. Right now, the discussion in Washington is funding the government. This I describe as is sort of the waking up in the morning and brushing your teeth, turning on the lights, and then brushing your teeth. It's not something you should brag about. It really isn't. If that is like a meaningful brag for you in the morning, you've got some real problems in your life. But we are at that stage right now where at the end of the fiscal year, there's all this drama around keeping the lights on and brushing our teeth. So I think it eventually happens. I think it happens next week. I don't think we have a government shutdown. I think wiser and cooler voices will prevail. And then Congress will leave until the national election. And what happens post-election is anyone's call. What's the control of the United States Senate, which is very tight, control there. And after the election, likely to have a tight margin over there of one party barely in control of the other. Mm-hmm. And likewise for the U.S. House, where Republicans are marginally in control of the U.S. House. Democrats are marginally in control of the United States Senate. And then the presidency is up for grabs. And with Joe Biden off the ballot, Kamala Harris on the ballot, you have Kamala Harris is not running on continuity. She's running on different. So we'll see what policies come out of what she is, her candidacy. That's still developing. And then as for President Trump, he's running on a similar set of policies that he ran on 4 and 8 years ago. So, there's some questions about the direction that the country takes, but it's going to be post-election before we really know where we're going in that regard with trade policy, tax policy, healthcare policy, housing, and regulatory policy. All those things are really up for grabs in this national election. So why don't I stop there? Why don't I take questions, because there's nothing worse on Zoom than just getting talked at.
Well, and sort of researching some for our Zoom, I was reading with interest the Jobs Act and your involvement in the Jobs Act, which is crowdfunding to some degree. Can you elaborate on the crowdfunding aspect and what that means to your constituents?
Sure. We have a couple of things. So, my father started a small business in our backyard, and the way he started that business was by getting a master charge, which was now MasterCard, by getting a credit card to buy his first piece of, second piece of equipment after the dealer financed his first piece of equipment. And that's how he started his business. Then he got bank loans and built from there. In order to scale up from bank loans, in order for a small business to scale, we often have to have access to investors in businesses. And investor protection is quite important, making sure that when somebody buys stock or ownership of a company, a financial instrument, that they know it's actually truly what it represents, what it says it is. So consumer protection, investor protection is very important. But for the last decade, we have tipped the scales. Actually, the last 20 years, we've tipped the scales into consumer protection at all costs, without a view that we need to help small businesses grow and scale. So the Jobs Act was the first curb on that trajectory, that said we have to balance this and ensure that small businesses can grow and scale up and get to become larger businesses. We need more small business startups. In America today, we have fewer small business startups than we did 40 years ago, than we did 50 years ago. That is problematic, especially since our population is much higher. So we need to cultivate small business development and growth. Startups are good. And so the Jobs Act cleaned up securities laws so investors can get access to smaller companies. And we've been at this work and continue to refine securities law since we passed the Jobs Act. And we continue to work on those items. And so crowdfunding was an effort for average everyday investors to get access to startups and make modest investments, whether it's in a local coffee shop or some innovative startup, and have access to these small businesses in a new and inventive way. And that is, there are a lot of projects that have come out of that, whether it's real estate or individual small business development, a lot of digital assets like cryptocurrencies and new software techniques and tools have raised money through crowdfunding since we passed the Jobs Act. So I think there's a huge opportunity for businesses to use that as a pipeline for their growth and to scale up into the rest of the federal securities regime that allow them to potentially go public at some stage.
Very nice. I would ask you to explain your involvement and explain crypto to me, but I don't think we can get that in.
Pretty simple. It's pretty simple. Everybody thinks that digital assets and crypto are fancy, different, and everything else. All right. So how many of us are on a Zoom right now? Okay. All right. 22 participants. I got it. All right. For 22 participants,
it'll be loaded on YouTube, so hundreds will see it afterwards.
Oh, well, I'm sorry. Then maybe I should clean up my language. So for a small group, the way that we could verify that I have possession of something and I've given it to Beth in a small group, it's pretty easy to do. Well, how do you do that in a large group? Well, you use software, right? So we could have a spreadsheet about the fact that, or a clip, we could have, in a small group, you could use a clipboard, and we could all write down the fact that we have taken the car keys, right? And we've put the car keys back. Well, how do you coordinate with a larger group? How do you schedule with a larger group? Well, you need a spreadsheet, and we have software to do that. Well, think of crypto is a substantial and large open distributed ledger. Well, what is a ledger? It is a spreadsheet for all of us in common parlance. It is a very sophisticated accounting tool that allows us to move without some third party holding it. We can exchange directly with one another through software and through the internet. Okay, so how do you verify that? Well, you have keys to verify that. So I have numbers and you have numbers, Beth. And then the object has its own numbers. So I can give you my numbers, its numbers, and your numbers, and we can have a transaction. Okay. So that's how you move value in a blockchain, which is a ledger, which is a fancy word for spreadsheet, which is like a massive clipboard for us to write down our exchanges of things. Right. And we verify it through the software. That way you don't have to have a third party say that actually I'm me and you're you. I don't know if that's a good explanation, but that's the best I got at this stage of a Friday morning. What we don't have in the United States is clarity about what is truly a digital asset. We know Bitcoin is a digital asset. It is a cryptocurrency, first of its class. And this open piece of software enabled the exchange of value, and holding on to that key has some value. And so that is what they call a Bitcoin, right? Ethereum, Solana, they're all doing similar things. And it is software, it is computer code, and it enables the exchange of things of value, whether it's a contract, Ethereum does this pretty well, or something of value. Bitcoin does that extraordinarily well. And so what we don't have in the United States is a definition of what that thing is, nor do we have consumer protections around it. Right. And if you have an asset that is computer code, how do you exchange that and sell that asset to someone else? We don't have a rules regime for that. Sure. We do that for commodities like corn futures, but we don't do that for this type of computer code. And so we have to clean that up so we have legal clarity on what is actually an innovation and what is a fraud. And then we have to have a means of exchange so that you can realize the value of the asset you own. And so we spent some time to do that. There's a financial aspect to it, but it's largely computer code that is going to unlock the potential for us to crush the cost of the exchange of goods and the exchange of value connected with the goods on the internet.
How difficult, Congressman, is it with crypto in mind, but many others, when innovation outsteps controls and legalization, and how when you have things like crypto and cell phones and all the advances, all the new innovative opportunities that then as Congress, you're circling back, running furiously to put guidelines and controls around it. How difficult is that?
It is always the case in our regime.
Mm-hmm.
If you go to Europe, the private sector asks for permission before they take action. In the United States, we just go, do, right? And it could be, husband and wife in the backyard doing something, creating something. Mm-hmm. And they realize they've got an innovation, something new, different, and interesting. It could be, but it's always been the case that the government is in the response mode. Look at AI, artificial intelligence. Right. We are foremost in the world right now with the development of a general purpose artificial intelligence, and so that is outstripping the government's ability to understand it or policymakers to understand it. Bitcoin was developed 12 years ago, and now government is trying to. I'm trying to write law to define what is a digital asset, and that's 12 years old. Automobiles. Every state and local government had rules around what you do with horses, carriages, and your responsibilities. And they had to adapt that to the internal combustion engine and the innovation of taking those wagons and hitching a general, internal combustion engine. We've always been responding to the marketplace, and that's largely good because we can make wiser policy after we understand what's happening in the marketplace, rather than foreseeing, like many are talking about with AI, that we have to put constraints on it before there's the thing is developed.
Right.
And at this stage of the game, it is really just a better chatbot. It is a better, I don't know how many of you are using ChatGPT rather than Googling things, but it is at this stage of the game, it's a replacement for Googling, and not always better. And so for us to have in that world constraints on something that's still developing is like us going back to the Model T and saying, slow down, slow down.
Right.
So we've got to be innovation forward. We have to continue to be permissive in our society for innovations, and be responsive to the needs, and hopefully wisely, responsibly, and quickly, reacting to those changes in the marketplace.
This year, the Committee for Responsible Federal Budget in May recognized you as the fiscal hero of the 118th Congress due to your work on the Fiscal Responsibility Act. I believe you also voted to restore fiscal sanity, was a headline or a point that I found. Can you provide a little summary about the act and how that affects North Carolinians?
Well, substantially, it's defined the terms of federal spending for this Congress. So let's rewind. So in the spring of last year, we were facing the debt ceiling, and the debt ceiling is we have overspending year over year that accrues to our debt. So our deficit adds to our national debt. Our national debt is 28 trillion at this stage. 25 years ago, it was roughly 7 to 8 trillion. We're at an unsustainable path for our national debt. We've had overspending out of Washington for a generation, and bipartisan overspending. So Speaker McCarthy said we have to have spending constraint in order to raise the debt ceiling. In order to have any new borrowing authority, we have to have a fiscal plan that reduces spending year over year. And so Speaker McCarthy asked me and Congressman Garrett Graves to go negotiate with the White House on behalf of House Republicans and get a deal to raise the debt ceiling that included spending cuts, year over year spending cuts. And we achieved that. And the Fiscal Responsibility Act, and actually hangs on my wall right here, the bill we signed that President Biden signed on June 3rd of 2023, was a bill that Garrett Graves and I wrote in negotiation with the White House. And it is the largest spending cuts in American history, and the first time in a decade that we've had year over year less discretionary spending. And that dictated the terms for our spending plan for the current fiscal year and this coming fiscal year. And it is a down payment on what we need to do to right size the federal government and to get the federal government back to a size that we can sustainably finance and pay for. Right now, you would have to more than double personal income tax rates in order to have any impact on the deficit in any significant way. The American people will not accept that. So we have to pare down spending in the coming generation. Generation policymakers have to pare down spending and get control of our federal outlays. We have record income to the federal government over the last 7 years. Record income as a percentage of the economy and in raw dollar terms. So income is actually fine. Tax receipts fine historically, but our spending is outpaced even record income to the federal government. So the Fiscal Responsibility Act was a recognition we have to do something. We have to bend this curve, and it's the down payment to do that. And honored to be a part of that negotiation. Honored to get it done with more drama than it needed to have. But that was, I believe, the most significant policymaking of this Congress, and honored to be a little part of that.
Can you speak a little bit to how Congress and government looks at reducing spending? So is there, I heard the term one time, creative destruction of various programs. The argument was the first program ever put in place and a dollar was ever put forward from the federal government 2,000 years ago is still probably in place. How do we clean up where we spend our money based on the act that you were involved with? But how do you look at reducing your spending and where the cuts come from? How is that accomplished?
So, I mean, right now, without fiscal discipline, without constraints on federal spending, and constraints by the voters on the elected class demanding change, we are facing federal spending like, so politicians may have broad discipline. We may say, well, no, I'm for cutting spending. And it's kind of like me going to a buffet. I'm pretty disciplined. I'm fairly disciplined about what I eat normally. But you take me to a buffet and there are not enough plates in the place for me to go back enough times. And that's what we've had, because that's what we've had from politicians in Washington, is because there's no demand by voters that we actually cut spending. And so we keep going back to the buffet without recognizing the consequences it's going to have on us long term. And so this is both parties. Neither nominee for president of the two great parties in this country mentioned the fiscal situation. Right. There's no discussion about it. Not brought up in the presidential debate. Either one of them. At a time where we have spending as a percentage of the economy is for the last since the year before COVID started, since 2019, it has been the highest percentage of the economy rendered. The spending of Washington compared to the size of the economy, it is higher in the last 7 years than it's been since World War II. So when you say, well, like we need to go, there's a tax debate about we need to raise taxes to go pay for this. Well, tax receipts during that time have been the highest as a percentage of the economy that we've seen in decades. And in fact, if we were spending like we were in the 1990s, if we're spending, the federal government was spending like they were during the Clinton presidency, we would have a balanced budget based off our tax receipts.
Okay.
And we'd have a balanced budget for the last I mean, the one year during COVID was weird, but outside of that, we would have a balanced budget over the last 6 or 7 years. So we have a problem. We just have a problem that there's not discipline. There's not the muscle memory to go look at programs, seek justification for the program and every dollar that is being spent. It's just like we have to do as families. You've got to go back through and say, do we really need this subscription? Right? Are we actually using it? And is this the best use of our monies? And we haven't done that in the federal government.
It feels like the federal government can create its own money, and
it's true.
10 years down the road, 20 years down the road, next generation down the road, it doesn't matter. It sometimes feels as though that is the environment that we're in, that we don't look towards what we're doing fiscally to the next generation.
That's right. That's right. But this comes from the voters.
Right.
It comes from the voters.
Important.
I mean, I brought this up and I've tried to bring this up for 20 years and there are no takers. I don't, when I actively did town halls, this was not a frequent question. When I telephone, like when I see people at grocery stores, this is not what they're talking.
Right.
So, but debt and deficits are much more like heart disease. It's fine until it gets you. But it's far better to be disciplined about it and manage this ahead of time rather than deal with the consequences. And the consequences right now is that 40% of our debt is financed by foreign nationals. 40%. So you want to talk about a limiting policy for us when we're asking the rest of the globe to finance our government. That seems to put us at risk. And so we've got to bring some fiscal discipline before the marketplace demands it of us. And then the consequences will be severe and it will impact people's lives, unfortunately.
Do you feel, well, I think the answer is yes, but what are ways to shift our conversations with our political leaders and political want to be leaders to shift our conversation to what really is the underlying theme, which is our fiscal responsibility? When I was a commissioner in the town of Davidson for 2 terms, and I remember the first thing I learned in our very quick education process, my 2 responsibilities were to vote and to balance the budget and take care of be the fiduciary responsibility of the taxpayers' dollars. They were the 2 solid responsibilities.
Yep.
What would be the top 3 responsibilities of a congressman and a senator at the national level?
Well, we don't have a requirement for a balanced budget. You had one.
Mm-hmm.
But it is to act as a fiduciary on behalf of the taxpayer. That's number one. Well, the number one for our federal system is a little loftier than that sounding, but it is to uphold our Constitution. It is to uphold our Constitution. And that is the limiting factor on me as a federal legislator.
Okay.
That and the voters, right? And so I've cast votes that I believe that upheld the constitutional order, that were that important that I would go home to explain to my constituents why I did something that they did not think I should have done, why I voted a certain way. And I'd explain to them why. And then you have to suffer the consequences of the election. If they want to vote you out, they vote you out, vote for you, vote against you, whatever it may be. But my highest obligation here is to uphold the constitutional order. And as an individual, I think I've got, a higher purpose than that, which is, and the discipline brought to me by my faith. But upholding the constitutional order is no trivial thing at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
And it is a limiting factor for all policymakers in in our federal government and should be viewed as such. Very specific limitations on us and very specific about individual liberties protections as well. So that's number one. Number two is being a fiduciary. And number three, it is improving the life and welfare of the American people year over year, and for the long term. So the health and welfare of the United States is cared for by economic growth, innovation, and prosperity. And I believe that comes out of capitalism. I believe that comes out of a free market and a free economy. And Bono of U2, said it best that capitalism has lifted more people out of poverty in this world than any other idea. And it is true. So fostering that free market, that free economy, helps individual families grow and prosper and communities grow and prosper. So those are the top three, and that's brief, but yes, that's what it is.
We have 15 more minutes. I have 15 more pages of questions I can ask. I want to open it up to the group online. Are there any questions out there that you may have for the Congressman? Somebody's raising their hand.
This is Faith Triggs with Habitat Charlotte Region. Thank you so much for meeting with us today. I think I met you up in Statesville last year. And I think if you could raise a magic wand after we get through this election, how do we bring the country together?
There is no magic wand on this. It comes out of people treating each other well, and then demanding their elected officials act like they want them to act. And that changes the incentive for politicians. It substantially changes the incentive for politicians, but this comes out of the populace. Public policy and our governmental structures are lagging indicators of the culture. And so what you see with politicians acting absolutely crazy and therefore getting attention comes directly out of our culture. So that means the people are getting what they want. Sadly, right? So the people have to demand different, and then the politicians will follow. So there is no magic wand. It comes from the culture, it comes from the people, and it comes from the incentives around our political structures. So changing the incentives, rewarding those that are trying to make things better, even if it's messy, even if it's a compromise. So those incentives have to change, and that comes from people demanding better out of their elected class.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll read one from the chat. It's a business owner in Lake Norman, also a patient advocate with a chronic disease. What do you say to families in our state that are choosing between paying rent and paying for healthcare? Do you have any thoughts on how to bring down cost right now for chronic disease patients?
Well, look, the healthcare debate. I mean, we still have the Affordable Care and Patient Protection Act, we commonly call Obamacare. That's still the law of the land at the federal level. We try to make substantial strides, and when my party's in charge of government, and the House, the Senate, and the White House, we're not able to. And so we're working under the constraints of the 2010 Act at the federal level. And there's desire for healthcare reform. Well, that was healthcare reform. And we try to make strides to improve it and turn the keys to this and the monies back to the states, where we can have a North Carolina solution rather than us having a 50-state solution. and us having a more responsive set of healthcare policies that would fit with North Carolinians' desires, and the fact that we actually have a really vibrant marketplace in healthcare options in North Carolina is different than other states. It's certainly different than the Vermont experience, the Maine experience, North Dakota, California, Florida. We have a very different marketplace. So I want to turn those keys back to North Carolinians and North Carolina policymakers, and the legislature can make better policies here than what is coming out of Washington. But I don't foresee that happening in for the rest of my term, which is 3 more months. The question of rent it comes from inflation. And I mentioned the inflation early in my talk. We are not building, we're not changing the dynamics on housing policy. We have significant constraints on growth, infrastructure being the key part of it. So for us to have national infrastructure that is the best in the world, rather than us lagging behind the rest of the world in important infrastructure, is problematic for housing policy and the ability for folks to commute, to live where they want to live, where they can afford to live, and commute to jobs that they want to have, that they think they can get the highest and best pay and most fruitful opportunities. And we deal with that in the Charlotte region, which means that we need to have a substantial infrastructure so that people can get in and out of Charlotte, and also have the type of first world, best in class connectivity, so that we can do this. We can Zoom and people can remote work, look out their window and see the lake, which I've got a nice view here in Washington. But it is not better than sitting on Lake Norman outside of my screen porch and seeing Lake Norman. So making sure that we have great infrastructure is going to help housing policy. That's going to take time, and that's not going to be a quick solution.
Yeah, even in my business, I mean, the number one in the financial services industry, and the number one question we get all the time is around healthcare. If someone retires early, prior to Medicare age, healthcare is more than their mortgage. Health insurance is super expensive. So thank you for the answer for that.
It is, and I buy because of Obamacare, I buy my healthcare through the federal exchange, even though I'm a federal employee. They carve Congress out, so I buy healthcare out of the Obamacare exchange. So no, this is not the best healthcare option. It's not affordable, and we haven't gotten to the question of affordability or patient control. And so there's a massive need for us to address this issue here in Washington and in every state in the nation.
Couple more questions we have in the chat. One is, what can you say about this year's unique election? Second is, what is your plans after leaving Congress?
Oh, that's great.
Excuse me 1 second, Congressman, if you'd also comment too, as far as elections, the current North Carolina elections as well. We've got elections up and down the ballot. Of course, the governor's situation. Love your comments and thoughts on that.
So I'm going to start with me because I don't want to start with that. As for me, it'll take me time next year figuring out what's next. I spent my whole adult life working around elections and public policy. So it's a massive change for me to leave office and to figure out what's next. So it'll take me some time going into next year. But having served in Congress for 10 terms and the state legislature before that, I do love our institutions. I'm not leaving public policy and being an elected official angry, mad, embittered, sad, whatever. But it was time for me to go. And the reason why it was time for me to go, I'd set a metric probably 10 years ago, 15 years ago, that if I was not going to be better and more effective the next Congress, I would not do it. I would not seek re-election. That was my metric. Can I be more effective for my constituents and be more effective here in the halls of Congress and get better outcomes? And after this experience of this Congress, as chair of the Financial Services Committee, having negotiated the debt ceiling agreement, having served as Speaker Pro Tem for 23 days as the Speaker of the House leading the institution, first, historic first for the institution, and spent so much time working very closely with the former Speaker of the House, Kevin McCarthy, my friend, Kevin. I realized that the next Congress, I was not going to be more effective than I was this Congress. So it was time.
Sounds like opportunity for a presidential run in 2028 to me.
And then as for the elections, look, North Carolina, there is no Senate race. So the top of the ballot is the presidential race. We have for the last 30 years, we have been a targeted race by both parties. Significant spend here in North Carolina in 2008 with Obama versus McCain, and likewise 12, 16, 20. And so the Harris campaign is spending significantly, and the Trump campaign is spending significantly. We're a tight state, and a massive statewide victory for either party is 4 points, and that'll be no different this year. It will be close. President Trump won the state in 16 and 20, and we elected a Democratic governor in 16 and 20. So that kind of explains the state to you and the state of play.
Right.
And since this is family programming, I'd rather not talk about the governor's election.
Fair enough. Well, we're coming to an end. We certainly appreciate your time, and I don't want to take too much more of your time. One final fun tidbit question. You were born in Gastonia and now live in Denver. Is it safe to assume that you are the first Gaston or Lincoln County residents who have made both the New York Times most stylish list for the bow ties and also to have been bitten by a rabid fox on Capitol Hill?
All right, I want to know who put you up to that one. That's a pretty specific thing. I see Will Bowen here. I don't know. Well, but no, funny enough, we've elected members of Congress from a member of Congress from Gaston County and from Lincoln County. So I'm not a first in that regard, but a first in those two counts. It has been a wild ride. It has been interesting. It has been meaningful. I'm grateful for every bit of the experience that I've been given, and grateful for my constituents giving me the opportunity to represent them here in Washington. So thank you. That's where I can finish, is just saying thank you. I'm deeply appreciative and grateful. And so wish you well, and wish you all well, and have a happy and prosperous and productive day. God bless.
Thank you so much, Congressman, and thank you for your 20 years of service. It is that's a lifetime in the political realm, and we recognize that and recognize the benefits. We'll all hope for fiscal responsibility, and I hope we all leave this asking questions about fiscal responsibility to our leaders. It's a very important, as you've heard today, a very important underlying thing. So thank you very much. Thank you all to Lake Norman. Everyone have a good afternoon. Enjoy the day.
Yes, thank you. I mentioned a
you.
few of the events coming up for the Lake Norman Chamber. Make sure to join or look at the lakenormanchamber.org website. We've got calendar events coming up with the Business Expo, the golf tournament, diversity luncheon. We've got the foundation fundraiser. So join the calendar for that. We did have a couple other questions. Sorry we couldn't get to all of them, but most of them were around fiscal responsibility and deficit spending, things like that. So thank you for the questions. Thank you, Congressman McHenry, for your time. It's much appreciated. We enjoy our Focus Fridays here. And sorry to Jeff Tart. He's usually the one to help facilitate. He's traveling today, so just wanted to mention him as well. But other than that, thank you, Congressman McHenry, and thank you, Beth, for helping facilitate the conversation.
Thanks, Doug.
We'll see y'all next time. Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.